I grew up in Houston, Texas, but every winter, my family would drive north to spend a few weeks at our relatives' property in a remote, rural part of Oklahoma. The area was quiet, mostly farmland, empty roads, and stretches of woods with small clusters of houses scattered miles apart. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and where older relatives always had strict warnings about what you should and shouldn't do after dark. As a city kid, I never took those warnings seriously. I was used to late-night drives, loud music, and wandering around whenever I felt like it. But one night in December 2017, I experienced something that changed the way I think about isolated places forever. That winter, there was a fuel shortage in the area. The nearest gas station that had compressed natural gas was nearly 30 minutes away. And because our family had several vehicles that relied on it, someone was always making late-night runs to fill up. Nobody ever liked going alone. The route passed through long, empty roads, and one particular stretch everyone avoided if possible. A road that ran directly alongside an enormous old cemetery. Locals had stories about that place. Plenty of them. Most of us laughed them off. Still, even the bravest people in town avoided driving past it after midnight. That night, my cousin and I headed out with two friends in a separate SUV. We drove together for safety, joking around the whole way. At the station, their SUV finished filling first. I told them to wait so we could all head back together. One of them got a call from home and said there was some kind of emergency. They insisted they had to leave immediately. I argued with them for a minute. Driving that road alone at night wasn't something anyone wanted to do. But they took off anyway. About 20 minutes later, my cousin and I finished filling up and started the drive back. As we approached the cemetery, we saw their SUV sitting motionless on the shoulder of the road. Its headlights were still on. At first, I figured they'd had a flat tire or engine trouble. But as we pulled closer, something felt wrong. The road was completely silent. No movement, no sound. The cemetery stretched beside us, dark and endless. My cousin and I stepped out. The freezing air hit us immediately. Both of our friends were standing outside their SUV. Neither of them was moving. They looked like they were unconscious, standing upright, frozen in place. I called out to them. Nothing. When I got close, I realized they were barely conscious, burning with fever and trembling violently. Their faces were pale with absolute terror. Neither could speak. We loaded one into our truck, and my cousin drove their SUV back while I drove ours. The entire trip home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following us. Neither of us said much. I just kept driving, gripping the wheel so tightly my hands hurt. The next morning, both of them were still running dangerously high fevers. For 2 full days, they barely spoke. When they finally recovered enough to explain what had happened, their story made my blood run cold. They said that as they passed the cemetery, they noticed something impossible. The entire graveyard was lit up. Not by moonlight, not by car headlights, by bright white lights scattered throughout the cemetery, as if floodlights had suddenly switched on. And there were people everywhere. Dozens of them, walking silently between the graves. At first, they thought some kind of late-night memorial service was happening. But then their SUV suddenly died. The engine cut out completely. No warning, no sputtering, just dead silence. I kept trying to restart it. Nothing. Then they looked back toward the cemetery. The figures had stopped moving. Every single one of them was staring directly at the SUV. That was the last thing they remembered. The next moment, they woke up standing outside their vehicle, with my cousin and me pulling up beside them. Neither remembered getting out of the SUV. Neither remembered losing consciousness. And neither could explain the fever that followed.
That story rattled me badly. After hearing it, I refused to drive that road after dark. But what truly convinced me something was wrong out there happened a few weeks later, when one of our older neighbors told us his own story. He was a practical man, not the kind to make things up. He said he'd been riding his motorcycle home late one night along another isolated road near the woods. As he drove, he noticed an elderly man walking alone along the roadside. Feeling bad for him, he slowed down and offered him a ride. The old man climbed onto the back of the motorcycle. At first, they talked normally, nothing unusual. Then, as they rode, the neighbor noticed something strange. The old man's body remained facing forward, but his head had turned completely backward. He was looking directly at him while continuing to speak casually, as if nothing were wrong. Our neighbor thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then he looked again. The old man's head was still twisted all the way around, staring straight into his face. The next second, the motorcycle stalled.
Growing up in the city made me skeptical of these kinds of stories. I used to laugh when my older relatives warned us not to wander at night. I thought they were just trying to scare us into staying close to home. I don't laugh anymore. I still visit that part of Oklahoma every winter, and every time I'm there, I pass that cemetery during the day. It looks ordinary, quiet, completely harmless. But once the sun starts to set, I make sure I'm nowhere near it. Because sometimes, late at night, when the road is empty and the fields are silent, I can't help wondering whether those lights are still out there, and whether the people walking between the graves are still waiting for someone to stop and look.